Good morning. I am so excited to be here at the S4 conference in Nairobi, Kenya. This is unbelievable for some of you who live in Nairobi. It is very cool to be from out of the country and to come to Nairobi. I've been here for 12 hours, so I'm an expert. So if anybody has any questions, just let me know. And so I am so excited to be here. I bring greetings from beautiful, sunny Southern California. And although I live in California, I didn't grow up in California. I actually grew up in the Philippines. And so I grew up in the Philippines when I was a teenager. Our family moved to the United States and we lived in Missouri. For some of you, you don't know where Missouri is, that's no problem. But we lived there. And after high school, I went to college there. I went to Bible college. And then I had the opportunity to work at my home church. And for about 8 years, I worked at my home church, and I loved every minute of it. It was so fun to be able to work in a lot of different areas. I got the chance to lead volunteers on a Sunday morning. I got the privilege of leading our children's ministry and launching an internship program. And over the course of the 8 years, I just loved being able to be a part of a lot of different roles in the church. And then God moved me to Texas. And so I moved to Texas to work in a church there, had a different role, a different church, a different city. And then about a year ago, God moved me to California. And now I work at Crosspoint Church, and I am the director of ministries. And what that means is I get to be a part of a lot of the different kinds of ministries that we have. So I get to be a part of our volunteers, I get to be a part of our discipleship groups, I get to be a part of our kids ministry, and I get to be a part of our youth ministry and our internship program. And so throughout all of those different things, I get to be a part of all of those things, and it's very exciting. And you know, as I was thinking about the last 10 years of me being in ministry, I've been at 3 different churches, 3 different cities, three different states, and had a lot of different roles. Has anybody here ever been in different roles? You've done more than just one thing in ministry? Okay. And you know, as I was thinking about the different seasons, there was one thing though that no matter what season I was in, that remained consistent. And this one thing, I have a feeling, even though I haven't met everybody here, that you probably have this thing that's consistent no matter what season you're in also. And it's this thing that where I have 2 pictures in my head at all times. I have 2 pictures when it comes to my ministries that I'm in, and I have the picture of what is. You know, the picture of the reality of what is, but that's not the only picture I have in my head. See, over here I have a picture of what could be. And so I have these 2 pictures in my head of what is, and then this other picture of what could be. So for you, maybe your picture of what is that you are a church planter, or maybe you're a brand new missionary and you're a one-man show. You show up, you lead worship, you preach, and you greet. And that's what you do every single week, and that is your picture of what is. But that's not the only picture in your mind. You have another picture, and it's this picture of what could be. And over here, you're not a one-man show. You've got an entire team of people. You have a team that leads worship. You have a team that greets. And every Sunday that you come to church, you're not doing it by yourself. You're doing it with a team, and it is unbelievable. Maybe for you, your picture of what is looks like you have a children's ministry with 5 volunteers. And those 5 volunteers, they are tired. Those 5 volunteers, they are burnt out. And every single Saturday, you pray to the Lord that you will have enough volunteers for that Sunday. And that is your picture of what is. But that's not the only picture in your mind. You have another picture of what could be. And over here, you have more volunteers than you know what to do with. Over here, in this picture of what could be, your volunteers, they don't just show up. They're happy. They're excited to be there. And you love it. Maybe for you, your picture of what is that you have a church of 50 people. And that's your reality. And every month you're inviting people week after week to come to church. But it's still 50 people. And you're stuck and you don't know what to do. And that is your picture of what is. But that's not the only picture you have. You have this other picture over here of what could be. And in this picture, there's not 50 people. There's 500 people. Maybe for some of you, there's 5,000 people in this picture of what could be. So we have these two pictures, what is and what could be. So my question is, how do you get from this picture to this picture? There's a lot that we could talk about in between these two pictures, but today I'm going to talk about one thing that I believe that if we invest as leaders, if we focus on this one thing, on creating this one thing, if we focus this year on this one thing, I believe it could be a catalyst to take you and your ministry from what is to what could be. And here's the one thing: creating a happy and healthy volunteer culture. Creating a happy and healthy volunteer culture. As church leaders, that is so vital to the ministry that we are in. That's so vital to this vision that God has given you for your city, for your country, for your church. It is so vital to be intentional to create a happy and a healthy volunteer culture. And so as we think about that, there's some questions that come to mind. The first question is, how do I get volunteers? Has anyone ever asked that question? How do I get volunteers? Amen. How do I get volunteers? I've asked that question. And you know, as I was asking that question, I started to think through, how do we do that as leaders? And this is huge. Pepsi talked about this too. We need to recruit to a vision and not a need. But here's where the problem comes in. You see, if we feel like God has put a call on our life to lead people to find and follow Jesus, and if we feel like God has this big thing in store for us to do in our city, in our church, here's the truth. No matter how great of a leader you are, you can't do that vision by yourself. You can't. Even if you're the best leader that has ever walked the face of Africa, you cannot do it by yourself. We need volunteers. So if we need volunteers, how do we recruit to the vision and not the need? Because the need is real. Here's how we do it. As leaders, we have to be intentional about the words that we say. We have to be intentional about the words that we say. And so, for instance, you might have the same need, but recruiting to a need and recruiting to a vision are two very different things. So maybe for you, you have so many 10-year-olds that you don't know what to do with. That's the need. You need more volunteers. And so what do? You get up, and this is what it's like to recruit to a need. If you were to get up at church and say, we have too many kids are coming, I don't know what to do with them. We have 3 of us back there trying to take care of these kids, but it's hard. It's hard, it's tiring, it's the worst day of the week. We need you. Can you sacrifice? Can you come? Can you be a part of this? We'll be miserable together. And how many people are going to sign up for that? Not a lot of people, right? Yeah. Well, here's the thing. The need is real. That's how you feel. That's okay that you feel that way. But instead, why don't you go when you tell your people, I've got good news for you? You know, we are growing in our kids' ministry. God is blessing. In fact, we've got more 10-year-olds than we can count, which means there is a place for you to serve. Do you want to invest in the next generation? Do you want your life to count? Then I want to invite you to be a part of something so much bigger than yourself. And I believe that if you decide to do this, you will not just impact here and now, you will impact the generations to come. Would you like to be a part of it? Do you see the difference between recruiting to a need and recruiting to a vision? We as leaders need to be intentional about recruiting to a vision. So once we get volunteers, what's next? I asked myself this question: how do I keep volunteers? Has anybody asked that question before? Maybe they come once or twice, but how do you get them to come back? But you know, I realize that's the wrong question. How do I keep volunteers is the wrong question. The real question needs to be, how can I care for and how can I inspire volunteers? You see, if we can care for and inspire volunteers, they'll keep coming back. So you don't have to worry about keeping them. And so how can we care for, how can we inspire volunteers? Well, the first thing we need to do is celebrate. We need to celebrate. We need to be intentional about celebrating small and celebrating big. How do you celebrate small? You celebrate small by simply looking them in the eyes and saying, thank you. Saying thank you. And being specific. Saying, hey, I noticed that when you were worshiping on stage, man, you were so full of passion that it inspired me to want to do the same thing. And so you just celebrate the specific things and you say thank you. Maybe you need to put it in your normal rhythm, in your normal routine. At the church that I'm at now, we have this thing we call pregame. And for anybody who's into sports, anytime you go out as a team, before you do that, you meet with your team. You meet with your team, you talk the strategy, and then you get pumped up. You get pumped up, why? Because you think you might just win that game. And you know what? We do that every Sunday morning. We have all of our volunteers come to pregame, and we tell them that, you know what, there are people that are coming into our building today who are lost, who don't know this hope that is found in Jesus. And today, you're going to greet somebody. And today they're going to see the smile on your face, and they are going to experience the love of Jesus. Today you're going to hold somebody's baby so that they can walk into the service and hear the gospel for the very first time. It's amazing. And we celebrate, and we say there are no ordinary Sundays. So maybe one of the ways you can celebrate is put it in your routine. Another thing that we need to be on purpose about is not celebrating small only, but celebrating big. Making big events for our volunteers. You know, at my home church, we did this thing for about 10 years, and every year we held the Volleys. Now, the Volleys is a made-up word. I made it up, and that's probably why I don't know about it, but the Volleys is, we combine two words, volunteer, and then like the Emmys or the Grammys from Hollywood, and we combined both of them. And what we did is we rolled out the red carpet for all of our volunteers, and so every year, they would get dressed up and they would come and we would celebrate. And what does that do? That tells them that we care about what they're doing. What they're doing matters. So we need to be intentional about celebrating big and celebrating small. Now this next one is fresh. This next one is what God has been teaching me this year. And one thing we need to do is we need to recognize that every volunteer is unique. You know, we talk about how we're unique. We preach about how we're unique. We know that God has made each of us unique, and yet sometimes as church leaders, we treat everybody the same. And that's what I've been doing. I've been leading everybody how I wanted to be led, which is awesome for everybody who's like me. But you know, people who are not wired like me, it doesn't work as well for them. And so knowing that each volunteer is unique and how we need to figure out their wiring so that we can best serve them, what do? We need to explore, we need to be intentional to learn more about personalities, learn more about how God has wired our volunteers. You can do that by looking at personality tests, reading books, and there's a lot that we can talk about, but today I want to tell you about one tool that has been a game changer for me, and it's called the 6 Human Needs. The 6 human needs. And there are 6 human needs that everybody has some of the 6 human needs in them, but all of us have one predominant thing that drives us. And so for some of us, it might be significance. Significance is what drives you. You want to be a part of something big. You want to be a part of something significant. And that is what drives you. But then there's another human need, and that is certainty. And what drives people with certainty is they must be certain. They need to make sure they don't just do the job, but they do the job right. And you know, the way that you can lead these 2 different types of people, they're very different. I had somebody who I was leading, and I was leading this person like I wanted to be led. I was having meetings and talking big picture and talking strategy, and I was asking her for her input, and she was full of anxiety. She didn't know what to do, and it just wasn't working. So I went to my pastor and said, "Can you help me? I'm doing everything I know what to do." And he says, "Tiff, what's her human need?" And I was like, "Oh, it's certainty." And I realized I was leading her how I wanted to be led, not how God had wired her. And so when I switched it, and I knew that, then all of a sudden I realized I need to give her a comprehensive game plan so that she can check out everything off of her list, so that she can be a part of this big vision, but she can be certain that she's doing all the right things. And so those are 2 of the 6 human needs, and I don't have time to dive into all of it today, but if you go to tiffanylyons.com, under resources, I actually have an interview with my pastor, and he goes into a deep dive of the 6 human needs, but it is a game changer to recognize that everyone is made differently, everyone is unique. And so we need to make sure and care for and inspire our volunteers. And then the next question is this: how can we identify and develop volunteer leaders? How can we identify and develop volunteer leaders? And I would venture to say that when it comes to our 2 pictures of what is and what could be, Developing volunteer leaders is a huge part of making that happen. Because the truth is, your picture of what could be is probably bigger than what you can do on your own. And so it's important to identify and develop volunteer leaders. And what we do as church leaders is sometimes we can be timid. Sometimes as church leaders we can say, I don't want to ask them to do too much. I feel bad. And so we don't. But what we're doing is a disservice, because there are people in our churches who are sitting on the sidelines, who are leaders, who God has put something inside of them, but we're too scared to ask. And I believe that there are people sitting on the sidelines not because they're too busy, but because we as church leaders never invited them to be a part of something bigger than themselves. And so it is our job to identify leaders and to say, I see in you that you have leadership ability. I see that you're gifted in leadership. Why don't you come and be a part of what God is doing at our church? Why don't you come and be a part and allow your giftings to be used so that more people can find and follow Jesus, so that more people can step into a relationship with Jesus. And when we invite people in and we coach them and we train them and then we give them the space to lead, then what we're doing is we're setting ourselves up to have a bigger reach. We're setting ourselves up to be able to accomplish more things. And one of the things that we have seen over the years that has been a huge part of just developing leaders has been an internship program. We've done it at all 3 of my churches, and over the course of the last 5 or 6 years, we've had over 100 people come through our internship program. And some of you might be thinking, I can't afford interns. Neither could we. We didn't pay them anything. We just invited them to be a part of something so much bigger than themselves. We said, I see this in you. I see that you could do something big. Why don't you come alongside? Work for 20 hours for free while they go to college. And we'll develop you, and we'll give you space to lead within the context of the local church. And what happens is, in our internship program, these teenagers and these college students, they start to discover what God has put inside of them, and this collides with this mission to reach people for Jesus. And when people get a taste of that, they don't want to ever stop doing that. And so it's so important for us as leaders, as church leaders, to make sure to always be intentional about developing volunteer leaders and identifying them, coaching them, inviting them to be a part of what God is doing in the church. So we have 2 pictures. What is and what could be. And today, if you make a decision to focus in on creating a happy and a healthy volunteer culture, I believe that we can get from what is to what could be as we equip other people to do what God has put them on this earth to do. Let's not be ministry ball hogs. Let's allow people to do what God has asked them to do, and let's watch God do something amazing in our churches, in our cities, in our country, and all around the world. Thank you so much.